I'm really, really thrilled and quite honored to moderate this panel. I want to give a shout out, first of all, to our co-organizers with ICAP and, of course, the World Bank, and then, obviously, IETA's team. So I'm Katie Sullivan with the International Emissions Trading Association, IETA, and there's so much effort and time and, frankly, tireless nights that go into organizing these events. And it is, it warms our hearts when we see the familiar faces and the newer faces that have an opportunity to listen and learn and build relationships over the course of I4C. So thanks to all of those out there who have made this happen, and thanks to all of you who have stuck around. And I hope that this topic will be as interesting to you as it is to us in our community. I think I got the jackpot, actually, in moderating this panel, because I think there is a lot of excitement around transition finance broadly, and then transition credits, clean energy transition credits specifically. There's a lot of attention and momentum around this space and these mechanisms, but there's also a lot of questions. It's still relatively nascent, right? And how does it look very familiar to what we've seen in the past when it comes to carbon markets and finance, and what are maybe some changes or differences as it evolves? Also, how do energy transition credits and these initiatives interact with many of the initiatives and markets that we have been nerding out on over the last couple of days, be it the voluntary carbon market or Article 6, right, or domestic markets? What does that look like? So we're going to take advantage of our speakers here today to dig into some of these questions and understand the latest around transition finance, broadly, again, transition credits specifically, and we will really be focusing on the US Energy Transition Accelerator, the ETA, and then also Traction, which has come out of Singapore. So with that, we have the delight of having, hopefully, Tan Chi Min from the she's Director and Head of Sustainability Ecosystem Development Division at the Monetary Authority of Singapore. Oh, wonderful. We see you. Hello. Oh, beautiful. We also have Alexa Kloisterberg, who I have known for a very, very long time, actually, and can never pronounce your name. Now the Associate Director, Corporate Action at the Bezos Earth Fund. We have Shadia Abreu, Advisor, Ministry of Energy and Mines, Dominican Republic. And last but certainly not least, Joel Gould, Senior Manager, Markets and Policy at B0, one of the leading ratings agencies in these markets. So we'll start with Alexa. Again, I've known you for a very long time. You've worn many, many hats over the years, from UNDP to Cali, PA, now Bezos, right, corporate. I've worn the same hat that whole time. Aida, sorry. Just a
You're a
reflection.
rock, Katie.
And now at Bezos, you are certainly involved in the ETA. So the Energy Transition Accelerator, and how you could give us a bit of background, a bit of overview, what makes the ETA unique compared to what maybe you've seen before, or what is emerging across other spaces now.
Great. Well, first of all, thank you for having me, and thank you all for coming to this panel on the last day. I know it's a hard lift, so I appreciate it before lunch here. So let me start with a fun fact. The IEA says that to be on track to reach the 1.5 degree target, clean energy investment in emerging countries and developing countries needs to ramp up by 6 times, or 6-fold, to about 1.6 trillion by the early 2030s. So that is a huge multiplier, and we're very far from that. And so that's really why the ETA was born. The Energy Transition Accelerator was launched at COP27. By John Kerry, announced by John Kerry and the State Department, together with the Rockefeller Foundation and the Bezos Earth Fund. So that is, those are the founding partners, and in, let's see, April of this year, we have announced that C2ES will be the secretariat for the ETA. And so what is the ETA, the Energy Transition Accelerator? There are 4 kind of core aspects. It is a buyer-seller alliance. So we are bringing buyers and sellers together to drive clean investment in developing countries. We are developing a new standard. We're working with Winrock to develop a new standard and methodology to credit these types of, it's basically to credit a jurisdictional approach for energy credits, for energy sector credits. So for those of you who are familiar with the LEAF initiative, that works in obviously with forestry and nature on a jurisdictional approach to generate credits, and we are kind of the parallel, if you will. We are similar in the sense that it is, we're developing a jurisdictional approach for energy credits, energy sector credits. That doesn't mean though that we are exclusively, we will use, exclusively this jurisdictional approach because it's a buyer-sellers alliance, and it's kind of this umbrella framework. We would accept other credits as well, as long as they meet kind of the standards that we've set out. So of course, there's there's whole guidance on additionality, and these credits need to be additional and verified and real, and we will be consistent. Our standard will be consistent with everything that's out there, all of the best out there. So ICVCM and Article 6 and CORSIA. So as long as credits are consistent, they could possibly be accepted kind of under the ETA framework. What types of activities are we talking about? Because it's a sector approach, we'd be looking at coal phase out and expanded renewables, and really accelerating the pace of renewable energy on the ground. We'd be looking at grid storage improvement and infrastructure investment, and even policies and measures that countries are putting in place. So this is really, it is unique, Katie, in that it's kind of expanding the world of activities, and it really is looking at all types of activities that accelerate the transition, right? So we're moving kind of just beyond a project-based approach where we can look broader and we can look deeper and look at all these other factors that really are needed in a country, in a developing country, to accelerate that transition. So the third component or characteristic is really that it will be an advanced purchase commitment. So we'll be having, there will be an intermediary where countries generate the credits, sell them to this intermediary, and they go to corporates, right? So and because of that, we are also starting to look at a range of options that where countries can actually generate revenue. And the credit sales can be leveraged by the host country to unlock that upfront finance. So that we know that's important. We hear that from countries all the time. We know that's the priority, and countries need that upfront finance to generate that transition, right? The ex post dollars are not going to work. And so we are responding to that, working actually with our partner countries, already our pilot countries, which are Chile, DR, and Philippines, to figure out those models, right? So that could look like a country issuing a bond. It could look like a special purpose vehicle. There are a number of options that we're looking at that we really want to make sure that the upfront finance is key. So, and lastly, the crediting program, of course, I would be remiss if I didn't mention the robust safeguards, environmental and social integrity, and just transition component too. So we've actually worked with EDF over the last year to develop kind of a just transition framework where we're really trying to go beyond do no harm. We know that's also important, and so there are a number of different elements that we'll be looking at to kind of ensure that all ETA credits meet all of those safeguards. And then there's also a great component which I'm proud of, which is kind of the share of proceeds equivalent for all of those familiar with the CDM, where 5% of the credits generated will go to raise funds for investments in adaptation and resilience for the most vulnerable. So those are the key characteristics. There's a lot there.
There's a lot there, but also I have so many questions, as I'm sure you guys do. But I think that was a great overview. I think quite thorough, and it will tee us up nicely for other discussions later on. What we'll do is quite similar. So Shimin, we really appreciate you joining us. We know it's not only hard to join virtually these kinds of events, but especially from Singapore, and the time right now. I hope you have a big glass of coffee, cup of coffee or something on hand. But you have been a champion with your team at the Monetary Authority of Singapore around traction, and there's some similar flavor to the ETA, but it's not identical, right? It is quite recent and still evolving, but as AIDA is a knowledge partner, so we see a lot of the activity. So why don't you provide that overview of traction? But maybe before that, can you just share some of the important and unique perspectives related to Asia and the energy transition, and really that is your focus area, and why it's so critical to have mechanisms like this that are executed at scale in bringing private sector to the table?
Okay, thank you, Katie. I'm assuming all of you are hearing me well.
Very, very clearly, yes.
Okay, thank you so much. And I'm sorry that I can't be there in person today, but really want to thank Aita and Katie for the opportunity for us to just contribute and share with everyone what we're doing in Singapore, but really not just about Singapore. It is what us really trying to see how we can support the region in this important transition. And that really brings me to what the particular issues that we face in Asia. And I start with these numbers. Some of you might actually, already know it by heart, but it's important to kind of remind ourselves that Asia accounts for half of the global greenhouse gas emissions, and of which a third is actually from coal-fired power plants. So if we continue to have these plants operating, they will really exhaust 2/3 of the carbon budget that we have remaining to keep within 1.5 degrees Celsius temperature rise. So we know that actually if we want the world to be able to reach net zero by 2050, we have to tackle coal. And then in Asia, this is particularly pertinent. So we started out then by looking at, if we want to support the region in transition, what do we need to look at? What is the most challenging problem? And that really then boils down to coal transition. So the fact that people are starting to realize this is an issue to be addressed, but we have yet to see much transactions on this front, is really because it is a very challenging issue, particularly in Asia. So first is really the scale of the problem. We are talking about like coal being nearly 60% of power generation in the region. Now, if we consider this against the fact that in Asia, energy demand is continually rising, and the estimation is that it will increase by 2.5 times by 2050. The question is, how can we create enough impetus for the switch from coal to clean in tandem with this growing energy demand, right? And then secondly is really the social impacts. And I think, Alexa has brought out that point about just transition. That is incredibly important because it is a very substantial key source of employment in this part of the world. So out of the 8.4 million which are employed globally across the coal value chain, we are talking about more than 80% of the individuals actually sitting in Asia. So obviously that is, a key social issue that we need to make sure is at the center of that transition. And then the third point is really the profile of the Asia's coal plants. In many countries, the coal plants are probably quite mature, but in Asia, we have a unique situation where on average, the coal plants are just less than 15 years old. And the typical technical life of a coal plant is actually 40 to 50 years. So we're talking about 15 years, preparing to operate for 40 years, but you ask them to shut down like today or like in 10 years' time. It just makes the economics of phasing out really very challenging, especially as new coal plants continue to be built to keep pace with the energy increase and energy demand that I previously spoke about. So the key, therefore, is how do we address this? And we are, therefore, then zooming in on the issue of how can we actually make such transactions a little bit more viable, less a bit more economical as well. Especially for those coal plants that have locked in long-term power purchase agreements, and these are actually revenue streams for the coal plant owners today. So this is where we see the potential of carbon credits, and in this case, we call it today transition credits. They can actually play a very constructive role. So what we are trying to explore, therefore, here is whether you can actually generate transition credits specifically from phasing out coal plants early and replacing them with clean energy sources. So hopefully then the additional revenue from selling these credits could actually improve the economic case for the coal plants to be retired much earlier than the locked-in revenue that they actually will get to enjoy today. And then if we can align the interests of the plant owners, align the interests of the capital provider, there will be that, hopefully, that impetus to consider accelerating that phasing out of the coal plants earlier rather than later. So this is really like the attempt that we are now embarking on. What we have done, therefore, is that we have published a concept paper in September last year together with McKinsey. And then at COP itself, COP last year, we launched a coalition, which is the Transition Credits Coalition. Of course, we are very glad IETA is on it. And then we have more than 30 members who are sitting there, from financiers, insurers, to service providers, rating agencies, etc. The idea is to pull together really this close group of members who have the expertise who can help us unpack what are the key challenges that needs to be addressed for us to actually scale transition credits as a viable solution. What are the practical circumstances that we need to consider when we want to implement this, even as a concept? And then at the same time, of course, we also have 2 pilot transactions in Philippines as well, because how ETA is looking at it, I think Philippines is a very ready partner. We have 2 plants, therefore, in Philippines, which are really actively looking at how they can integrate transition credits as part of their retirement plans. So broadly, I just want to share that. There will, of course, be so much details that I can talk about, but I will probably stop there and give it time back to Katie first.
Shimin, that was wonderful. And again, virtually, it came across extremely clearly. I want you to know and have comfort on that. And it's riveting. The audience is riveted, as am I. So if we have then take what you have just shared, summary, and I know it's really hard to pack so much information into 5-minute overview. But if we have then Alexa and the ETA, that is very much jurisdictional approach, Leaf Coalition, buyer-seller alliance, pilots in, Alexa, I'm looking at you, Dominican and Chile and
Nigeria.
And Philippines.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, Philippines. And then we have Traction. So again, here's new acronyms, right? ETA, Energy Transition Accelerator. Traction is the Transition Credit Coalition, which Shimin just explained quite clearly. We also have the Coal to Clean initiative, that's CCCI. But I think with also the explanation, focus on Asia, very much with Traction, right? And bringing together dozens of these market participants and key players, including IETA and B0, right? And are you looking at standard development? So when we look at the US ETA and the development of a core framework and a standard, right, for ETA credits, is that what Traction is doing? Just to be clear about that, Shimin.
Thanks, Katie. So a very good question. So we are definitely not coming out with any methodology. So that to us is very clear. So the purpose of the work is really to look at market level issues, leveraging on the excellent work that has been done out there by Windrock, by CCCI, by Gold Standard. In fact, like ADB themselves are also looking at crediting methodologies. By leveraging on these methodologies, which are already in draft forms out there, pulling together all this like wisdom and knowledge, and really as a market, look at it across the board and really tease out what are the important elements that we need on three fronts actually. One is on integrity. How should the market navigate the different types of methodology out there, for instance? What are the key things that they should be looking for additionality, for leakage issues, things like that? Break it down a little bit for the market so that they can appreciate that. And then also give a clearer understanding of what type of situation is suitable for transition credits and what type is not. Because the truth is that we probably can't apply this to every single project or every single market. So I think we have to also be clear on what that potential pool of opportunity could be and let the market, explore that. Then also another area that we want to look at is actually like on the transaction level, what are the key things? What are the risks? What are the solutions? Can we unpack that for the market so they have a toolkit, they have a playbook that they can use to start thinking about it from a very concrete manner, beyond just having the methodology to, guide the process. And of course, like we are very keen to establish that demands, what is that risk, and what is that concern that investors could have, and how can we help them navigate that? So basically, that's the purpose of the work, rather than standard setting per se or crediting methodology per se.
Extremely well said. A very important clarification. And I just wanted to make sure that we're so short on time that the audience, when they left today, they understood that the nature of traction, some of the differences with what we're seeing in ETA. So, Shadia. We have Dominican Republic that is one of the pilots for the ETA. And maybe start us off, maybe a bit like how Ximin approached it, just DR broadly, what you're grappling with, some of the emissions, energy sector, the profiles, right, the challenges to drive financing, and then obviously take it to the step, why has DR decided to say, we're ready to pilot with ETA. We like the prospects here.
Thank you, Katie. Yeah, it's really wonderful to be here with such esteemed colleagues, and thank you all for being here. So yeah, in order to provide some context first, the Dominican Republic is one of the fastest growing economies in Latin America. And this comes with a really, really big increase of electricity demand. I think to give some estimates, peak demand in 2022 compared to 2023 increased 14%, which is like we, in our planning, in all the scenarios that we have, the tendential scenario was like 5%. And there's a lot of causes to this. The first one is economic growth, but there's also the government policy and access to energy, to give access to energy to 98% of the population. We're really proud to say that this is an issue that in the past 5 to 10 years has 90% of the population has access to energy. But of course, we are facing heat waves. We are facing a lot of challenges that are not unique to the Dominican Republic. But the difference is the Dominican Republic is one of the countries that is more vulnerable to climate change. Like we see developers now in climate risk because of hurricanes, because of earthquakes, because of the position of an island country. We see that insurance costs are 30% higher than other areas in the region. So all these things are starting to add up to project development, right? But it's not only that. I think we always have this idea, and our minister always mentioned that energy transition is going to differ. It's going to be very particular to each country because it's going to have its own challenges. And the Dominican Republic is an island country. We're not interconnected to anyone. We're starting to talk about interconnection with Puerto Rico, but basically the intrinsicies of project development in DDR are very particular, where even the prediction of the resources, you would have a cloud and a solar project that is expected to produce X amount of megawatts in a day would be 0. And then these contracts are based on energy generator generated rather than as a mere financial instrument. So there's a lot of details that go into project development that I think need to be taken into account in the particular process of the Dominican Republic. However, the government, and we are always very proud to showcase that because we want to position ourselves as one of the leaders of the region for sustainable development, we've increased our renewable energy projects by close to double the amount that we had in 2020. And the interesting thing is
2020 wasn't that long ago.
Exactly. But the interesting thing is that we are expecting to double that amount again by 2027. So the COD of 27 utility scale projects is between the end of this year and 2027. I think we don't need to be energy experts to know that now we're starting to see system-wide issues. Like Alexa mentioned, transmission congestion. We're starting to see the need for utility scale storage, but we are also starting to see the need to change market rules. We need new policies. We need legal frameworks. We need all these things. And I remember someone mentioning about the essence of carbon markets. It's actually to achieve this energy transition. And all of these projects, all of these things that I just mentioned are required to allow for this high penetration of renewables. We are estimating that to achieve all our commitments and all our goals, we're going to need about 5.4 billion US dollars to achieve our goals by 2030. I don't know, maybe it doesn't sound that much money for larger economies, but for us, it's really a lot of money, and it's money that it's gonna increase the fiscal and the deficit of the government and the debt that we are incurring. So we are really eager to find new ways to achieve this financing. We are looking into a lot of different projects. And I think the most interesting thing about ETA is that we've been working with ETA from the beginning. So I would say that I personally feel that they are listening to us. They are listening to these needs. They are listening to the difference of all these countries and understanding that Alexa mentioned a jurisdictional approach. And I think because Joel asked me this before, it means an energy sector scale approach. So it means any little reduction in the energy industry counts. So if you have an energy efficiency measure that's going to allow for a reduction, it counts. I think the challenge is on their end of developing the methodology and understanding how this is going to work. But I think overall, we are really committed to our energy transition, our own energy transition, but definitely we're trying to explore all the different mechanisms available to try to find market-based solutions that are going to allow us to achieve our goals.
Very well said. And I love, it was a little while back, and it was Dan Yergin. I don't know who's familiar with Dan Yergin, but Energy Market's grandfather wrote The Quest. And he was on a podcast, and he said that, he's like, we have to think of this in the world of energy transitions, plural, because there's going to be different dynamics and requirements depending on that region, right? That region when it comes to its emissions growth profile and its population and its, storage capabilities and, trade and all that jazz. So I think it's nice that you framed it in that manner. It's also important to know that you have, from the beginning, makes a lot of sense, been at the table with the ETA as it has, I assume, gone through its core framework, right, and working through its actual methodology. Quick question, and then we'll go to Joel, is just, again, for reference, so fossil energy production, natural gas, I assume, is a biggie, right? So give us just a sense of what the mix is across these other fuel types.
Yes. So I think as many countries, we are using natural gas as a transition fuel. So in 2020, most of our energy matrix was HFO, like fossil fuels, and coal. But as of now, 40% of our energy matrix is natural gas. And the National Energy Plan is to transition to have about 60% natural gas, 30% renewables. And then there's, I think, Shamin mentioned something similar because we have a really big coal plant that is relatively new, it's state-owned. So I think that one's going to have, it's going to be a kind of hard to transition away. I do want to mention that we are working with the Climate Investment Fund in their Accelerating Coal Transition Program. So we are actually trying to align the additional need for the phase out of the two plants that are in the process of like their life cycle has already concluded, and we are working with them in this process, and we are trying to align the credits that ETA could unlock upfront financing for with this initiative. And the government is also working on our first green bond emissions. So I think everything, like the whole scenario, it's working for us to transition away from fossil fuels. Unfortunately, about 80% of our energy matrix is still fossil fuels, so we have a long way to go. But I'm confident. I'm confident that we're going to get there.
I bet you're a really, really busy woman connecting those dots. Okay, so, one quickie, and then Joel, promise. Is DR Leaf Coalition?
I don't think so.
Yeah.
Natalie can help me, but no.
Okay, just checking. So, Joel, B0, I'm sure many of you know, right? One of the leading ratings agencies. And I think it's really fascinating to have your view here. You are obviously in the trenches across all these markets and working away and ratings. But you're seeing the emergence of these transition credits across various spheres. You're also at the table of traction. I know that, because I'm there too. So why don't you just share a bit actually first about just B0, ratings agency, so we're all on the same page, and then thinking about it through the kind of lens of these new mechanisms, and then maybe specific to traction and some of potentially ETA, right, that role that ratings agencies like B0 can play.
Okay, great. Yeah, well, thank you very much for the invitation to speak on the panel. Yeah, so I can start off by just introducing B0. So our mission is all about bringing transparency to carbon markets, and it's based on our kind of fundamental belief that key to unlocking investment across carbon markets is better information about carbon projects, and specifically about their carbon efficacy and their co-benefits. So what we think this does in terms of buyers is it gives them the ability to put a price on the risk of projects, and therefore helps to unlock decisions at both ends of the market, the early investment end and the end buyer end, helping to unlock liquidity. So what we do is we rate projects based on the likelihood of them achieving their stated carbon impact. And so we use a rating scale which is essentially analogous to that used in financial markets, so for bonds, so AAA to D. And what that does is, it simplifies the understanding of carbon efficacy of projects for kind of buyers and investors and indeed all actors across the market. We can also assess the co-benefits of carbon projects, which is obviously really important in this specific aspect, what we call our Beyond Carbon assessment. Our kind of headline rating is based on the consideration of 3 risk factors. That's carbon accounting. So essentially that's asking the question, is the project delivering its impact without pushing emissions elsewhere? Additionality, so would that project have happened without the carbon finance provided by credits? And then finally, permanence. So is the project going to deliver its impact across the kind of promised lifetime of the project? And so how do we do that? We employ about 100 or close to 100 specialized ratings analysts. So we have.
You have over 100?
About 100 now.
My gosh.
I think it will be 100 by the end of the year.
When you were just so tiny. Yes, okay.
And they're basically structured in teams that are specialized across forestry, mangroves, renewable energy, technological removals, all aspects of the carbon market. And that's kind of supported by our geospatial and data science teams to provide the information that our ratings analysts use. Yeah, so as I said, we kind of work across the market. We have clients from kind of all parts of the market, end buyers, intermediaries, project developers, investors. We assess projects at any stage. So as a business, we started off rating only projects ex post. So we rated them after they'd issued credits, and we used publicly available information. Increasingly, we're working at the other end of the market with full projects of issued credits, with project developers, with investors, giving what we call an ex-ante rating. And yeah, that's very much geared at unlocking the finance needed at the early stages of a project, giving reassurance to actors, helping them make decisions about which projects to invest in, helping project developers differentiate their projects from others. So just final point on B0, which is, I guess, kind of important, again, in this context, is sort of our transparency and integrity. Like, fundamentally, what we do is we offer an opinion, our opinion about the carbon efficacy of projects. Our opinion is only valuable in the market if we're seen to be trusted, and we hold ourselves to a high standard. So, we take actions like we publish all of our post-issuance ratings, our headline rating, online for free, freely available, so anyone can kind of see our ex-post ratings for about, I think it's close to 500 projects that we've rated now ex-post. We publish all of our methodologies at a sector level, so how we rate projects in different sectors online, so anyone can see those. And then we also take actions like separating our ratings team from our commercial team. And we don't engage in buyer-seller referrals, things like that, to kind of guard our, I guess, integrity and stuff in the market. I guess kind of relating some of that back to transition credits, which is what we're
Yes, please. Thank you.
I will speak very briefly on this. So yeah, as I said, we're very pleased to be part of the Monetary Authority of Singapore's Traction Initiative. We're a knowledge partner for them, and I guess what we're trying to bring to this initiative is our technical experience in terms of the projects that we've rated in the market, helping them develop the integrity principles around these new types of credits. Obviously drawing on our risk framework and our specific experience in certain projects. And yeah, that's something that we're very pleased to be a part of. I think fundamentally, a glib answer to how do we see ourselves supporting this market is through our ratings. We're a ratings agency. We rate projects.
Really?
Yes.
Okay.
So yes, we're very happy to kind of provide technical support and support integrity initiatives where we can. But fundamentally, that's kind of where we see ourselves supporting this market. And it can be an early stage. It can be post issuance once these projects are up and running. I guess it just comes back to things I was saying about what we think is really needed here in this specific area is that kind of transparency, and buyers, if they're going to buy these credits, need to trust them. It's particularly kind of with these kind of novel new types of credits. Certain buyers are likely to need a lot of convincing, a lot of reassurance that these projects are truly delivering their claims, and that's what we think ratings can provide.
So that is. Can I?
Yes, yeah.
Because it's the perfect segue, and we have very little time.
Yeah.
Buyers. But I also want to, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No.
I'm just seeing a very big red 5 minutes left, and I know I have a plane to get to. Are there questions in the, I want to just get feel for how many questions we have, because I certainly do want to. All right, we have 2 over here. Are there any questions?
There's one.
1 over here. Okay, so see you. Before, I want to talk buyers, because we can't leave this room and not ask. We'll ask Alexa first, and then Shimin, I'll come to you, okay? But who are the buyers, or what is the criteria, buyer requirements? I don't think you touched on it as much earlier, and I think it's a really, really important one and a question mark for many of us.
Great, and I can do it pretty quickly.
All right.
I'm with you, Katie. All right, so who are the buyers for the Energy Transition Accelerator? Private companies, of course, and potentially sovereign buyers. So right now, currently, the ETA is engaging with over 30 multinationals that are potential buyers, and we're keeping them updated kind of on a monthly basis. We're bringing them along in the process, just like we're working very closely and hand in hand with our pilot countries. We are also working hand in hand with our buyers as we go and as we look towards this really important phase of methodology development. So who are they? We have retail, banking, finance, food and beverage, tech, electricity, automotive, entertainment. These are pretty big names.
U.S. based?
These
or
are
all?
mostly U.S.
Yeah.
based. It's Bank of America, MasterCard, McDonald's. I mean, they really are multinational. Pepsi, Salesforce, General Motors, Meta, Nestle. So mostly U.S. based, but very multinational. Yeah, I mean, we're talking broad here. And yes, of course, we have requirements, like eligibility or engagement requirements for our buyers, both if they were to be corporates or sovereigns. So those are things that you would expect, right? Do they have an SBTI or an equivalent in place where they're really aiming at 1.5 degrees? Do they have mid-century net zero targets? Do they publicly report their greenhouse gas emissions? These are all very intuitive things.
SBTI target is a requirement?
SBTI or equivalent, yes.
Oh, okay, sorry. Emphasize italics. Got it. Thank you.
And so are they also, planning to meet their target? Are they reporting on the achievement of their target? And then are they reporting on the use of credits? So that would be for a corporate, whereas for a sovereign, we'd be looking at more things like, do they have an NDC that is pointed at their highest ambition possible? An LTS, these long-term strategies that countries are required to have for 2050, and would they have no new coal permitting? So, yeah.
Very interesting. Thank you. Okay, and Shimin, maybe it is, I recognize it's different, the nature, right, of traction. So it's not like, oh, we have a bunch of buyers for these credits that we are going to be anointing, right? So, I mean, you can kind of riff off Alexa, but also I think ICVCM and just how you are ensuring complementarity or watching ICVCM would be helpful to the group, just very briefly, and then I will go to these three questions in the audience.
Well, I mean, ICVCM is like clearly at the center of our thinking when we think about integrity. How do we align with core carbon principles? And we have been engaging ICVCM. They sit in as observer of traction as well to follow the developments. They would have to assess for themselves, how transition credits would look like, what are the actual mechanisms that would safeguard, meet the core carbon principles, etc. So I think from an ICVCM standpoint, it's not specifically on demand, but it's really how will they be able to assess the different programs and different methodologies for their own core carbon principles framework. So I think this is how Traction tries to be helpful in what we think would come to ICVCM at some point. Once you have the methodologies published and finalized, they will submit it for endorsement. So we want to be helpful to ICVCM and also sharing with them the knowledge that we have picked up from the markets and the thoughts that we formulate and share it back with them. So this is the collaboration that we have with ICVCM.
Beautiful.
Do you think I can just add one more point on sovereign demand since we were on demand side?
Of course, yes.
Very quick one, just make a plug here. Really, because like in our work, what to us is important is also trying to have a good sense of where the potential demand could be coming from, and to really show that Singapore is supportive of this development. What we have announced at COP last year is also that Singapore government is prepared to offtake transition credits that meet our environmental integrity criteria. So we wanted to give that boost that even though the underlying is a coal transition, coal in itself is not the issue. It is really about the transition. So we wanted to provide the confidence that this is something that the government is also prepared to look at as a sovereign buyer. And very recently, just last month, then we signed an MOU on Article 6.2 with Philippine government. And because we have 2 pilot transactions there, it also lines up various mechanisms that we hope to explore to see if demand can be built up on that front as well, on top of course, the corporate and voluntary buyers, as well as other sectorial buyers, which are equally important to build that ecosystem.
Incredibly important, and I'm really glad you squeezed that in, Shimin, and just Singapore's leadership on markets both domestically and internationally. There's a reason why AIDA has set up a shop there with actual employees, because we're really bullish and just so support the work that Singapore is doing in the region and globally. It's critical, including on Article 6. So let's take, do we have a mic support? Could we take, please be very quick with your question, and we'll just go down the line, take all the questions at once, and then we'll briefly answer. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I have my question goes to the Singaporean colleagues and Bezos Earth Fund. So that at the first look, the concept of transition credits for the early phase out of coal power plants risk concerns that money might be channeled into coal power plants themselves, which seems to contradict the polluters should pay principle. So instead of holding polluters accountable, this approach seems to be subsidizing coal power plants, potentially extending their lifespan, especially you mentioned that the relatively young age of many coal fleets in Asia. So can you explain the measures in place to ensure the transition credits do not prolong the operations of coal power plants? And additionally, very tiny question is, are you exploring any other Asian countries besides the Philippines to piloting transition credits? Because we know the Philippines have a liberalized energy market, which providing this leeways for such pilot. When I asked the questions to the head of Indonesia's JAPI Secretariat yesterday, he expressed hesitation about using transition credits until certain questions being answered. How do you view these concerns, and are there any other plans to engage other countries in the region? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Actually, right behind you. Thanks.
Thank you. Nico Kreiby from Wuppertal Institute. Thanks for the great panel. It's really interesting. I have one question to the ETA, or regarding the ETA. How do you ensure alignment of the ETA with the Paris Agreement, or more specifically to Article 6 in particular, with regard to additionality and also the question of corresponding adjustments?
We didn't even put you as a plant, but that is exactly the question we were going to ask if we had more time. So perfect. And then we have a gentleman over here. Thanks.
Hi, I have two questions. One is about the energy transition itself. When we mention transition, it means we transit from something to another thing. But for some poor countries, they may even don't have the coal plant. But their electricity access is very low. For example, Zambia. Last month, I met some official from the energy department of Zambia, and they highly relied on the hydropower. But their energy access is below 50%. So they hope to build new coal plant for supply more power to their people. So is there any way to help them to if they don't have any coal power plant to retire? Another one is from my country. I'm from China. We have much more power plant in than any other countries. I think the main concern of Chinese government is about the energy security. It's not about some economical encouragement. So do you have any idea or any thought about how to ease this worry about the energy security? Thank you.
That's a heavy one at the end. Okay, so rapid fire. And Ximin, are you ready? Rapid fire? Okay, so we'll start at the beginning, taking on the paying polluters. Instead of polluter pays, paying polluters to shut down, and then the possible risk of possible expansion. And also, I'm going to throw the same one at you, beyond the Philippines, recognizing you are doing this in partnership, Philippines, the pilots, right? But what other possible countries are there? And then I think the other questions, not all, but largely ETA.
Yeah. Okay, I'll keep it short. A very important question, and thanks for raising that. That is really the center of what we want to address in terms of how does that transition look like, and how can that be really credible, that we really achieve a transition away from coal into clean. So I think at the crux of that, in all the methodologies that you will see out there, there is this very strong element where you actually have to pair the retirement of the coal plant by replacing that with renewables to different extents, so that you can also then credibly say that it actually not only takes out the supply, it is actually being replaced by something else that is actually stable, secure, and would be able to meet the energy demand by taking out that coal plant. This is where then you better achieve the permanence effect of retiring that coal plant early. And I would add that from a baseline, when you calculate the energy, when you calculate the carbon credits that can be generated from the baseline perspectives, I think all the methodologies will really look at the actual reduction in the emissions before the credits can be generated. So in a sense, you have to shut down before you get the credits as well. So it wouldn't be a case where, like you are lengthening the life of the coal plant because you wouldn't be able to get the credits if you did not shut down. So I think that is also an important mechanism and safeguard to preserve the integrity of this transition, and achieve the outcome that we actually set out to achieve, and not prolonging the coal plant's lifetime, which is really the important question to ask. And then whether we are open to other markets, absolutely. Frankly, I mean, I would say that we did not seek out particular markets, but we let the market kind of like give us that feedback on who is actually more ready. So we are always in conversations with people who heard of our concept, want to explore more, and they will bring it to their network, and then they will come to us with conversations and pilot possibilities for us to consider. So we don't really, say that we are targeting particular market. We let the market actually drive those conversations. So in that sense, we are taking a slightly different approach. We are very, pragmatic in how can we make this work on the ground? Who are we? Who can we partner with who are willing to actually work this through with us, because it's not going to be an easy process as well. So we do want those willing partners to come to us to do that. So there's actually a lot of that ground up feedback to us rather than us seeking particular markets.
So you let them come to you, but that's important for an audience like I4C. So for awareness, there is not a big marketing budget and out there and trying. They come to you.
I'm afraid not.
And you've clearly answered that first question many times before, like a pro. So if we go to, I want the Paris corresponding adjustment. This is the one. So thank you for the question.
Of
so
course,
take that one.
That's the $1 million question. Yeah. Yeah, just to say off the bat that ETA is contemplated already in our framework and the work that's starting up with Winrock to fully align with Article 6, with CORSIA, and with ICBCM. So like we are, matching that floor. And for those of you who know, these are the people who are engaged in ETA, Kelly Gazire, who negotiated, Article 6, Molly Peters-Stanley, who is a negotiator for the US, and is also on the ETA team from the State Department side. So these are people very fully aware of what's going on in all these fora, and whose main goal is to have the ETA result in consistency. So, with Paris, we know that it kind of all comes down to authorized use. And so really, when we're looking at ETA, when ETA credits are used for voluntary purposes, then the host country wouldn't authorize, basically. They wouldn't authorize. They would choose not to authorize, and these credits would be issued. And then they would not need to subsequently apply corresponding adjustment. But of course, for sovereign buyers, when we're looking at sovereign buyers or even the private sector, when the use is for any compliance mechanism or even other international purposes like CORSIA, then of course we would be expecting corresponding adjustment.
Thank you. And I think the final thing, just the one question, what if there's no coal?
Yes. So I think this is a very good question because this is my daily life, convincing people.
So I saw Shadia like,
Yes, of course. So I think, when you have buyers like the ones you have on ETA, you don't have to make an economic case because they really are doing it for corporate environmental purposes. But in developing countries, when you're talking about coal phase out or substitution, you're making an economic case. Each country is going to have its own differences, but for us, it's about energy independence. Usually coal is base load power. So basically it means you don't have the flexibility to during the hours where you have a lot of sun, you bring more and then you bring it down. So you make an economic case about systems, markets, how they work, and you, especially for the DR who's not a producer of coal and has to buy the coal, energy independence, because like in the past 2 or 3 years, it has been very, very stable, but a year before that, it was skyrocketing, and then basically it affected electricity prices in Dominican Republic, and you don't want to depend on any of those things, so you really make an economic case about these things, and you present it to the audiences. It's not an easy process because stakeholders in developing countries really have the case for energy security and the need of coal, but I think we believe, and I think a lot of other people believe, that it's economically viable to start retiring coal because as well, the market, the least you have demand overall for coal, then the prices are going to increase and you're going to be vulnerable to all these price increases. So you really don't want to do that. The case of China is going to be very particular, but I think everyone should start exploring where the world is going, because it's not going to be only like we want to comply with the environmental commitments. It's going to be an economic and an actually viability of the costs case.
100%, and I think that's a great way to wrap it because it is like very pragmatic. It's exciting. It does recognize the stark realities, especially in this. My word of 2024 is the wobbly world geopolitically, right? But you're facing energy security and national security and inflation here, and the affordability is critical, right? So I think everybody is just really excited to see where these mechanisms, initiatives head, right? The type of appetite for that. Hats off to the leadership, ETA, also obviously Singapore and what you've brought together. It's still early days, but I suspect that it'll move relatively fast. And with that, we are out of time. So Shimin, thank you so much again for joining us. Please get some rest, go to bed. We'll come to you soon in Singapore and Asia. And just a round of applause for all my speakers, Shimin, Alexa, Joel, Shadia. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Katie.
And I encourage you to speak with them now through lunch, but not me. I have to go get a plane. Go get a new plane.